Hey everyone, Sycra here, and I'm back with another traditional drawing video, because you guys seem to like the last one, or at least I got a lot of positive feedback about it. So, yeah, feel free to draw along with me, and today I'm using markers instead of pencil and pen, just because, I don't know, I also changed my camera position, so I thought maybe I tried pencil and it didn't show up so well. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll try markers, and I really don't know what I'm doing with markers, so don't really ask me about how to use markers because I don't know. I just have a set of markers that I never use, so I thought I'll use them. And yeah, I'm sorry that the camera keeps like focusing and going out of focus. I guess it has an autofocus and I don't know how to set that up, so again, I apologize. If you prefer the other setup I have with the GoPro, let me know, or if you prefer this one, in the comments, just let me know which one you prefer, and that'll be a big help. So today I kind of wanted to talk about depression and my thoughts on it, and really, I have to stress that it's just my opinions. I've had personal experience with depression. I've studied a lot of psychology. I've been in therapy for over, or have been, yeah, in therapy for over 10 years. And I've had a lot of experience with psychoanalytic psychotherapy, EMDR, hypnotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy. So I kind of have some knowledge about the subject, but I'm not like a psychologist by any means. So I'm just going to say my opinions, and feel free to disagree with them because they are just opinions. But anyway, what I hear a lot with depression is this phrase that depression is an illness, and it's something that sort of bothers me because I feel like it's an oversimplification to say it that way. And yeah, I hear a lot of theories about depression, and different people will have different ideas. Like, oh, actually, depression is caused by bad diet, or oh, you feel depressed if you don't exercise, or oh, depression is just completely biological. Once you get it, it's just like getting any other disease, and you just have to treat it from that point on. And none of these ideas really felt right to me. And I started thinking about it because even when I would see professional psychiatrists and psychologists, what they were telling me didn't feel right, or at least it didn't feel right to me. And then I started thinking about this idea that what if depression isn't a bad thing? Because prior to this, I was always thinking of it as this bad thing. Because when I felt depressed, I felt horrible. Many times I wanted to kill myself. So it was definitely a feeling that seemed to be very negative. Even to the point of, because okay, what's our main strongest instinct? It's probably to survive, right? To survive and to reproduce. And if depression makes you want to kill yourself, that's kind of going against the most, I don't know, primitive, normal feeling you should have. So I started to feel like, well, okay, so depression must be this negative, horrible thing. It seems like it's the worst condition you can get because you feel just terrible. I remember when I was depressed, I had to get my wisdom teeth removed, and I had a condition called dry socket, which makes it's extremely painful. But I remember the physical pain, and I just started laughing because it felt so much easier to handle than my depression. Like, the emotional and mental pain was so much worse than this physical pain. So it depression definitely feel terrible. And there's different kinds of depression, you know. There's mild depression, and there's chronic depression, and I think I've had the whole spectrum of different kinds, from just a sort of existential depression to suicidal depression, and it's none of it is very nice. And I'm sorry for talking about this subject. I just feel like I'm gonna lead it into art, or I'll try to lead it into art, but yeah, I sort of feel sometimes that's like, I want to talk about other things than just art, but I worry about alienating my viewers. And anyway, just gonna try. If this fails, it fails. You know, if you don't want me to talk about this, then this will be the last video. I'll go back to just being a strictly art thing. But anyway, so I started thinking, you know, originally I felt depression is this horrible, bad thing. Then I started thinking about it differently, and I thought, what if it's not? What if depression is a signal that something is wrong? And that, I don't know, when I first had that idea, it seemed to make some kind of sense. It felt like the same thing as when I'm doing, like when I was doing the lightning bolt technique or the coil technique or things. Whenever I come up with art ideas, there's this feeling that, hey, you're onto something here. And so when I thought of, well, maybe depression is a signal, it was that same feeling that, maybe there is something here. And so I think anger is a signal. So what I mean by that is, anger in itself is not right or wrong. It's just a signal that you feel like you or someone else has suffered or has had an injustice suffered upon them or something. It's like letting you know you are being hurt, or you're suffering an injustice. It's really a signal. Now maybe you're not maybe it's a perceived injustice that perhaps I don't want to say you shouldn't be feeling, because I feel not great about the word shouldn't, because it's like, well, who's to say what you should or shouldn't feel? Feelings are just feelings. But like maybe it's not rational perhaps to be feeling it, or you could be handling it differently, and then you don't have to get angry. But the anger itself it's just a signal of something else. And it's the same as when like babies cry, right? Babies don't cry because they're good babies or they're bad babies or anything like that. They cry because that's how they communicate. And when I draw, so here I'll bring it into art, and I try and draw just by intuition and just using that right side of the brain, I start to feel like the way I know I'm making the right line is because I feel changes in like my muscles. Maybe they get more tensed or more relaxed. And when they get tensed, it feels like I'm gonna make a wrong line, so I won't. And that's how I listen to the right side of my brain, because it can't tell me anything. It's not the part of your brain that can verbalize and that can let you know, hey, do this or do that. And so it feels like the unconscious or the subconscious relies on different ways of communicating, or even your body, it relies on different ways of communicating. Like when you eat something, your body will respond accordingly, whether it's, this is good food, hey, it will respond well. Or it'll be, maybe you'll start getting fat and it's letting you know, like, hey, you know what? This is probably not the right type of food for you because you don't need these calories. But it can't just tell you things. So I thought maybe it's the same way as depression. Maybe there is some part of you that knows very well what is good for you. And even the word good, it's hard because it's almost like good and bad. It feels like a judgment, and it's like, I don't want to be saying things like this is this or that. But something that's beneficial, let's put it that way. And So then I'm thinking, okay, so let's say depression was a signal. And then the next time I was having depression, I start to think, okay, so this is a signal that something is wrong. Something I'm doing is bothering me. And a concrete example was I was in this job and it was paying pretty okay, but I was feeling really depressed. And when I started to think, wait, is it because I'm in this job that, like, is this job not right? And then I started to think, well, why wouldn't it be right? And it really didn't feel like it was suited to me. It didn't feel like it was something I really wanted to pursue, and I was doing it more for the money. So I ended up leaving, and as soon as I did, I felt way better. And so that seemed to me to prove that, well, yeah, the depression is a signal that something is wrong. But then there's this feeling of, well, what about other situations where someone's in a situation where nothing is wrong and they still feel bad? And to that I would say, how do you know nothing is wrong? Because for me, I'm pretty sensitive, and I think a lot of artists are perhaps more sensitive than a lot of the, average people maybe. And I would get like feelings of depression just seeing, and not extreme depression, but just like a discomfort, just being in environments that weren't really, I don't know, aesthetically pleasing. It would just, I wouldn't feel that good. Eating food that just, like I noticed, for instance, certain fruits were tasting worse than they used to. Apples, I noticed that they were looking better and tasting worse. And I would ask people, I would say, have you noticed that apples taste different? And people would be, I don't know, it tastes about the same. But it would bother me, and I really could taste it. I'm like, no, this is wrong. But it like little things like that, like maybe society as a whole is sick. And this is what sort of bothered me, because then if that's true, what I would hear from psychologists or counselors or people like this, they would always say, the job is to make you well adjusted to society. That's like the goal. But if society's sick and you're well adjusted to a sick society, then you are not healthy. And it is hard, because it's like, well, what can you do? But the way I like to think of it is that it's better to know than not know, because when you know, you can make changes. And I've heard, okay, so things like when people say, well, depression is just, it's more about diet. And then I'll hear like a speaker and they'll just talk about how, oh, you change your diet and you feel better and all this stuff. And what comes in my head is that KISS principle, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. And I feel like that is so wrong most of the time, because I have my own principle that I made up, and it's the HINTS principle, and it stands for, hey, it's not that simple. And really, with things like that, the way I think about it is like, okay, and I was told this a long time ago, and it seemed to make a lot of sense, but they said with stress, imagine you have a jar, right, like a glass jar or something, and it's filled with marbles. Now, not all the way to the top, but you add marbles, and those marbles are stress. And then once the jar gets to the top, that's when you have bad side effects, like depression or anxiety or whatever. It's when that jar is filled. And I kind of like that idea more, because then if I think of it this way, like, okay, so we're all these jars and we have marbles. Okay, maybe the jar's filling up, and maybe some of those marbles are your diet, right? So if you're eating badly, throw in more marbles. But then some are also your environment, maybe your emotional state. And for me, that was really the big one. Lots of things I could handle, But when things were going bad in my relationship, that was like the worst. That's like 100 marbles right there. So then the trick is, okay, so all I have to do is make sure this jar is not full, and I'll be okay. I'll be underneath the threshold. And so, for instance, let's say my job is making me depressed, but I need this job. I can't get, so maybe there's 20 job marbles in my jar that I'm supposed to get rid of, but I can't because I need this job. This is something I need to be doing. Fine. Well, then I can check for other things. I can check for my diet. I can check whether I'm exercising. I could check whether I'm doing things that are fulfilling. Sometimes, giving is really helpful to take out marbles. There's lots of different things. Like, what do you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy drawing? Does that add more stress, So you start thinking in those ways, and then suddenly, because you're not thinking of it so simply like, oh, it's my depression is caused by diet, then you can deal with it like, yeah, diet's a component, sure, why not? And to bring it back to art, this is what I notice a lot as well, is that actually it's not just art, it's everywhere. Like, even, okay, I work out at the gym, and then you get the type of people who are into CrossFit, and they'll say, oh, CrossFit's so great. You'll get the bodybuilder types who are talking about that being so great, and you'll get other people, and everyone thinks their way is so great. And I saw the same thing when in art, like, oh no, traditional is better, digital's not good, or oh, you shouldn't draw anime, you shouldn't do this, or you need to do this. And again, it just reminds me of that, like the depression, and saying like, oh, you're depressed because you have a poor diet. And it's like, it's not that simple. Or, hey, it's not that simple. The hey, you don't really need it there. But then you don't need the stupid and the kiss principle, right? So it comes from the same place. But anyway, yeah, it's this idea that, no, it doesn't have to be so simple. Why would you put yourself in this box that you can't even control it? Because to oversimplify things means if this thing doesn't work, then what do? I don't know, because I only have one option, right? Like, I'm sorry to keep going back to diet, but it's easy. Let's just say exercise. Let's say, oh, you need to be getting more exercise, or you need to be going outside more. You need to be socializing more. If it's just one thing, and you can't fix that one thing, then you're screwed. But if it's a combination of a bunch of different things, even if one of those things is really, adding a lot more stress than some of the others, and it would be good to get rid of that most stressful thing, and hopefully you can get rid of that if you notice it. But even if you can't, you can do other things. You can get rid of your problems in different ways. You could change your environment or exercise more. And the great thing about talking to people is what I feel like, let's say you have a really good friend, and this friend has, their jar is maybe only a quarter full, and yours is like 90% full, it's reaching the top. Or even you have suffered, maybe your jar holds 100 marbles, and you just had something in your life happen that adds 150 marbles. Then it's like, I can't even take these marbles out fast enough. This is the worst. And that's kind of what happens. That leads to suicidal thinking. It's just this overwhelming feeling of like, I can't, this is too hard. Even to make it through the next minute feels unbearable. I don't even know how I'm going to get through it. So how am I supposed to get through the next hour or the next day or the next week? And people say, hey, don't worry, it gets better. But it's like, I can't even think of the future right now. And that's tough. I mean, the truth is that, yeah, it does get better. But yeah, it's true that it's really hard to get through it. But again, if you have a friend who only has their marbles, their jar is not so full, then you could pass on like 50 marbles to them. a friend of mine said a saying, a burden shared is a burden halved, and I think that's very true. And so really does help to have people who can help you with that. But anyway, I don't know, I feel like I've talked enough about the depression thing, and I've said my main points, really that it's not that simple. And yeah, to carry that over into other parts of life. I hear it a lot in comments where people will say, you said this thing, and often they're sort of misinterpreting it, or they're just oversimplifying it. Like, how many hours should I work a day on art? You said you worked 6 hours, and it's like, I can't tell you that. Like, it's not that simple that it's just a case of like work more. You need to think of, or not work more, but how many hours are going to be the right amount. You got to think of a bunch of different things. A lot of factors go into what will make a good artist, or what will make you feel better. And at first it does feel overwhelming to think that, well, it's just a ton of stuff, and I have to think about it, and oh, what could it be, and I have to listen to my body, and I have to try and think, okay, this feeling, if it's bad, it's coming from somewhere legitimate. It's not just this abstract or unnecessary feeling. And I almost feel like with antidepressants, for me, one of the I'm going to say good things. Of course, some people it does help, but for me, I had a certain disorder. I had a dissociative disorder that antidepressants did not work for it. So I didn't have to go down that road. But I feel like antidepressants are a little bit like painkillers in a sense that, for instance, let's say you get hurt, right? You break your arm, and okay, so you go to the doctor and they put your arm in a cast, and then you take painkillers to get rid of the pain. That's okay. But what if you're taking painkillers and it's so that you don't feel any pain, and then you get your arm broken but you don't even notice, or maybe not your arm, some other thing broken, but you don't even notice it because it's not painful? Then what's going to happen is you're just going to keep acting like everything's normal, but maybe those bones are going to start to fuse and they're going to heal in the wrong way, and then you won't even be able to move properly, and it'll lead to more problems. It's sort of saying that, you're hiding the symptoms, but the symptoms are what's telling you that something's wrong. So maybe, at least in the beginning, it's good to know, hey, something's wrong. This isn't coming from nowhere. To assume that it's all coming from nowhere, I feel it's a mistake. Because, again, I'm just talking. This could be, controversial, because people could tell me, and you're very right to tell me your own thoughts are different. That's fine. I'm just saying what I've noticed for myself. So it may help you, it may not. But I just think, like, you got to learn to pay attention to signals and not just push them away. But when it comes to art, it's a case of not being so arrogant as to assume it's one thing, right? Or asking why. Like when I go to the gym and people are saying, oh, this is better, that's better, I sort of feel like, well, it just seems like they both do different things. It's not like, especially this idea that there's a good and a bad, or a good and evil, a right and a wrong. And to me, it just feels like the more you think about it, the more things just are not that simple. It's because even if something, you might think it's good, but it's like, is there nothing bad involved with that, or a bad thing? Is there no good that can come out of that? And in the end, when you really start to learn about people, or learn about yourself, or learn about anything, you notice that it just is more like circumstances. And when you think of it that way, like, hey, should I do digital or traditional? Well, instead of thinking of it like there's a right or a wrong answer, think of it like there's just a cost and a benefit. if I do traditional, I'll get better at doing traditional. Okay, what's the cost? Won't get as good perhaps at doing digital. If I do digital, I'll get better at doing digital. And there's other things, of course, like, well, with traditional, because you have no undo button, it also trains you to become more disciplined. Okay, well, with digital, because you don't have to worry about wasting supplies, and it's not expensive, and you don't have to clean your brushes, you have a lot more time to experiment. Oh, that's good. So then it's just a bunch of choices in front of you, and you decide, okay, what choice do I pick? Same with schools, you know. Well, it costs this much money to go to this school. It's not that you have to or you don't have to, it's just add up all the pros and the cons. Like, okay, so these are the costs, and these are the benefits, and these are the costs in this other thing, maybe not going to school, these are the costs, and these are the benefits. And then you do that for everything, and you just realize, like, nothing's perfect. There's no utopia. And I almost feel like if people thought more like that, there's no perfect answer, there's just different answers, and then we would be able to make a lot more helpful decisions, because we wouldn't be going for this is better than that. We'd just be looking at, well, what's good about this, and what's bad about, or what's not as good about this, or not as useful to me about this, right? It keeps you from making judgments, because I feel if you say something like, this is bad, it's like, okay, so what do we do about that? Oh, you can't do anything, it's bad. But if you say, this is not helpful, then it's an easy or an easy follow-up question, which is, okay, well, what could I do that is more helpful? Then you can look at things. Same with cultures. You look at cultures, and some people might think like, oh, this culture is so great, and I like it so much better. It's like, well, okay, so what's some of the negative things about it then? Because everything has that. It all has that. If you thought about, a case of like heaven, if there was a heaven, and it's like, okay, so what will it be like? Well, it'll be in the clouds, and everything will be all bright, and there'll be people playing the harp, and it's like, well, what about some guy who hates the harp? He likes dark places. It's like, it's not gonna be perfect. There's nothing that's perfect. There's no right answer. There's only answers. There's only things you can do, choices to make. So I would just, really encourage people who aren't doing this, and I'm sorry if you are doing this, just like, I don't need to hear that from you. In which case, just, again, let me know if you have experience with depression, what you think. I don't mind having conflicting ideas. I like to think of it like this. I wear my beliefs like I wear clothes. I can take them on or off. As soon as there's a better idea, I'll change my views really quick, because I'm not invested in them. I just want to have the best ideas. And I also know that that's always going to change. So, again, to bring it back to art, let's say you watch a tutorial I did, and you're like, oh, I kind of don't agree with that part of it, but I do agree with this other part. Does it mean I need to listen to the whole thing? Or is this guy just full of it, and he doesn't know what he's talking about? And again, it's like, why does it have to be that way? Why can't it just be like, I agree with some of the things you're saying, and I disagree with some of the things. Now, maybe I disagree because I'm not sure, it's coming from a place of ignorance, or maybe I genuinely feel that some of what you say just, either it's wrong or not right or maybe it's just not right for me, in which case it's like, cool, take what you like and leave what you don't, and then go somewhere else and take those things that you like and leave what you don't. And in the end, you just have a bunch of stuff you want, and you don't have to put up with a lot of the stuff you don't like. And a lot of times I feel like people, they settle for things that it's like, well, maybe you do have to settle. You have to compromise a little bit. But anyway, it is like, maybe they settle too soon for things they don't necessarily want, and it's because it's like, well, but I want these other things. And again, you do have to compromise sometimes, but yeah, I guess if I wanted what I want people to walk away from this with is just that it's not that simple, and to think of things maybe more like signals. When something's wrong, think of it like a signal. Especially, even if something's wrong with like a friendship, think about it like a signal. Like, hey, something's not working and it can be fixed. And sometimes it can't be fixed, but usually it can be fixed. So anyway, yeah, so here I was just using these touch markers. I think they're by Shinhan. And now I'm using a calligraphy marker, and I'll include what the tools are in the description, so don't worry, you just look in the description. Sorry I couldn't really talk too much about what I was doing with the image. I'm not really happy with them, but what else is new, right? Because I don't know, it makes me really nervous whenever I do these drawings, whenever I have the camera on. I don't know why, but I seem to forget everything. So I try to not care that I'm making images that aren't so good, and I can erase because it's a marker, so it's like, uh-oh. So here it's just the image that I did, and I did one more that didn't get recorded because I don't know the camera. I thought it was I hit record, but I guess not. So anyway, this is that last image, and I don't know, hope you got something out of this, and thanks for watching.